Here we are with my old friend, colleague, and Hall of Famer Steve Flink, and we are going to talk about Miami Open. And the draw was just made, and well, first of all, we have to say, dear Steve, first of all, good evening. Sorry about that.
Good evening, Ubaldo.
Okay. Second,
Yeah.
we have to say that Djokovic is missing this tournament after he didn't perform well. He lost to an Italian player called Luca Nardi, and recently he has lost 3 times by Yannick Sinner, once by Luca Nardi, last year once in Monte Carlo by Lorenzo Musetti, some years ago by Sonego. I believe that Djokovic has an inferiority complex with the Italian tennis players.
Well, I think the next time he sees you, he's going to ask you for help.
Yeah.
But I also heard that he lost a practice set to you.
Yeah, well, he lost. He didn't keep his promise when he said, "I will play with you some rallies." And we were supposed to play in Australia years ago. Then it was so hot that he could practice only on indoor surface, indoor court, and so we never did practice. We never played.
But seriously, Ubaldo, you must have been shocked by the Nardi victory, though. Seriously, I mean, who could see that coming over Djokovic?
Yeah, nobody could see it. Nobody, especially since Luca Nardi was a lucky loser.
Right.
He
right.
won against Zhang, his first top 50 players in the world, and nobody could expect him to win, especially after he lost the second set. But now we should talk about Miami, and we should say that maybe maybe Djokovic made the right choice not to play in Miami if he wasn't fit, and if he wants to play well in Monte Carlo and the clay season.
That seems to be, I have to believe that's the main reason why he decided not to go, was that he figured he was a little down on himself after Indian Wells, and he'd have to hang around, and then yes, there'd be less time for Monte Carlo, and maybe he figures he could clear his mind a little bit, and I can see why he decided to do that. On the other hand, it's disappointing for him to lose early in Indian Wells and not even play Miami after missing these tournaments over these last 5 years. So I think it's a good decision, though. I expect that maybe this year in Monte Carlo we see him a little sharper, a little more better prepared for that tournament.
Yeah, because sometimes he didn't play well in Monte Carlo, and so maybe this time, he's a resident over there. So I mean, to lose again on the first rounds also in Monte Carlo would be quite shocking, I guess, for him and for his fans.
Yeah.
Anyway, about Miami, let's see. First of all, of course, without Djokovic, we have Alcaraz and Zverev with Rune in the same half, and we have Ruud, Medvedev, Rublev, and Sinner in the other half, if we consider just the top 8 players. So, what do you think? I mean, I think that nobody. I mean, who is more dangerous between Medvedev and Zverev for Alcaraz and Sinner? If you look at the head-to-head, Zverev seems more dangerous. But then in Indian Wells, Zverev lost very badly.
He did. On the other hand, he beat Carlos in the year-end championships in Turin, and he beat him in Australian Open. So he hasn't forgotten about those. And this court will be faster than Indian Wells. But still, when you've taken such a thumping as he did against Carlos and on a windy day in Indian Wells, and that also just gives Carlos a lot of confidence. So I think they'll have if they meet in Miami, I think the match will be a good deal closer, but I still think Alcaraz will win it.
Yeah. Yes, well, if you look at the quality of their games, when Djokovic is not around, when the best Djokovic is not around, now you would think that especially on our court, or maybe even maybe even more than indoor and more than clay, Sinner and Alcaraz should always be the favorite to play the finals, one versus the other.
I think so. On my own, and I think we would anticipate that that would happen in Miami. The only thing giving me some doubt about it is something you and I talked about yesterday, which is Sinner being a bit beaten up right now physically, and there was some doubt whether he would even play Miami. So it could be that he's not at his best, and maybe he doesn't get to that final because of his leg or his wrist or his elbow, whatever it might be. I hope for his sake that he is 100% physically. If he is, very good chance of a Sinner Alcaraz final. It's a nice follow up to the semifinal in Indian Wells. Love to see that.
Sorry. Now go ahead.
No, I said I'd love to see that happen. I'm just a little bit concerned about Sinner's physical condition right now. That's the only thing that keeps me from predicting without any qualifications that he'd make it. I'm a little bit torn right now about whether he's going to get through, whether he's going to make it through physically, whether he, and there's always the chance he could pull out of the tournament, even though the draw's been made if he's having practice. But I have to also believe the thing that gives me more encouragement is that you got to figure he could have just pulled out before they even made the draw and said, no, I'm not going. So he has to have some hope that in the days ahead, he can heal. And hopefully he will heal.
Yeah, I do agree with you. Let's say that apparently his draw could give him almost a week, let's say,
right,
to recover, because he has to play either a qualifier or cash in the Argentinian player who shouldn't be dangerous, and later on maybe Greek sport that he beat quite easily all the time that he played him, and then he may have the first really tough opponent with Tommy Paul in the last 16. So that
would be fun. That would be very interesting right now, given how well Tommy Paul played in Indian Wells and a great match that he played against Medvedev. But by then, if we see Sinner winning his first couple of matches easily before he plays Tommy Paul, then you figure he would be ready. Sinner would be ready to play against Paul and would beat him. The real indication I would think would be those first couple, and if he struggles against Greek sport, that would be a bad sign.
Yeah, of course. Listen, then there could be. I mentioned Paul reaching the last 16, even if Paul could have to play a derby with Francis Tiafoe, who is in the same side of the draw and the same place. I don't know. Now Tiafoe doesn't seem at his best, no?
No, he doesn't. And Tommy Paul just beat him pretty badly not too many weeks ago in the U.S. on the hard court. So I think, and Tiafoe has just been struggling in general. So Tommy Paul in his current form would be a clear favorite against Tiafoe.
One thing I want to mention, because not all our readers may have noticed, and even if sounds quite chauvinistic, is that there are 7 Italians in the draw, and 5 of them, included Sinner, are only 22 years old, and a 6th one is Arnaldi, who became 23 years old in February. So we have 7 Italian who are in the top 100, and all of them but Sonego are either all 22 or maybe just 23. And then we have also Berrettini, who was in the final after 7 months of injuries. he played the final in a challenger in Phoenix, Arizona. So
Right.
he won 4 tiebreakers in a row. Of course, he's not in his best shape, but I'm curious to see him playing Andy Murray on the first round, because last year at the Australian Open, he lost 7-6 in the fifth after having match points against Murray. But that was so, you know, this may sound too Italian, but I think Sinner is the top of the iceberg of the Italian tennis, but the Italian tennis is doing pretty well.
I think Berrettini Murray will be very close again, though, because he's still working his way back. As you say, he made the challenger final, but Andy's been playing a lot. I can still see that match being very, very tight. But right now, Berrettini, with all the matches he got in Phoenix, I would maybe give him a slight edge to beat Murray.
Yeah. Anyway, what about the rest? I mean, Alcaraz, in my opinion, has quite a good draw, even if, you know, there are players, because players like Monfils or Chorich or the Musetti, maybe Shelton could be his
that would be
the most dangerous opponent in the last 16, no?
Yeah, you just mentioned Sinner, you know, the Sinner Tommy Paul, and the same thing here. Shelton, Alcaraz, they had a pretty good match last summer. Ben would maybe learn something from that match. I don't see him beating Carlos the way Carlos is playing right now, but he will test him. He will test him, and he might get him into a tiebreaker or two if he's serving his best. That would be a lot of fun to watch that match. And also, you'd have the American crowd getting behind. I mean, Carlos is usually the crowd favorite, but Ben's the American, so they would get behind him. Most likely would be a night match. And I can see that being like a 7-6, 6-4 for Carlos.
Yeah. Yeah. And, you know, then there is another player, American player, that I always expect him to win more than what he does. I'm talking about Sebastian Korda, because I like him the way he plays, but then he has a lot of ups and downs. He also must struggle physically too often, I guess. But you know, he could do well, even if, for instance, he has to play maybe after a qualifier in his first round, because there are 2 qualifiers playing one versus each other. Then he may have to play Urkash, and Urkash is a good test, because Urkash doesn't lose very often to weaker players.
No, but Korda beat him in Australian Open a year ago when he had the great Australian Open run himself. He knocked off Hurkacz, and he can beat. He has a good chance in that match. You know what, Ubaldo? His problem is that I agree with you. His game is great to watch. You watch him play, and you wonder why he doesn't win more. It's that he's too often hurt, and he hurt the wrist last year. That's what got him after the great run in the Australian Open. Then he hurt his wrist, and he was out for quite a while. He came back later in the year. He never was quite the same as he'd been at the start of the year when he had match point against Djokovic in Adelaide, and then had his great run at the Australian Open. So I feel like, you know, maybe this is his time. He looked good in Indian Wells against Medvedev. It was a very close 3-set match that he lost to him, and his forehand let him down at some key moments, Ubaldo. He misses forehands, not by much, but he is very small margin for error, and that's the side that goes on him, is his forehand. So if his forehand holds up well against Hurkacz, we'll see. But then one of those guys might end up playing Carlos, right? I mean, looks to me like I was thinking Hubie might end up playing Carlos in the quarters, but maybe it'll be Korda.
Yeah, it could be. But there is also Dimitrov, who this year is quite dangerous, and he started very well the year, and he seems to have new motivations, new strength. And then if we look more down in that same half of the draw, well, there could be a early match between Rune and Lechka. And Lechka was beaten easily by Sinner, but before he was able to beat in both Rublev and later on also Tsitsipas, quite
Yeah,
convincing.
yeah. Those were two very good wins. Two very good wins.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're right. That could be quite interesting. You know, the Lehečka seems to. We've been waiting for him to make a move for the last year. I have, at least. I've been surprised that his results haven't been better. But that was an excellent Indian Wells for him.
Yeah, and so Lehečka Rune would be interesting because Rune is also another player who is very promising, or promising, how do you say?
Promise. That's right. That's right.
Yeah, but you know, he changed so many coaches. Now he's back with Muratoglu. Then he had Becker for a while. Then he
Yeah,
had.
yeah.
If there was our common friend Rino Tommasi, he would have said that that Rune is changing as many coaches as Liz Taylor husbands. This was one of his favorite quotes. Every time there was someone changing a lot, he was saying he's like Liz Taylor with the husbands. Because she had about 6, 7, 8, I don't know many.
No, it's true. You worry about it because he already left Mouratoglou to go to Becker, now to come back to Mouratoglou. I hope it lasts this time. He was good in Indian Wells in coming back from match point down to beat Fritz, and then he played quite well against Medvedev. And he played well at the end of last year when he was with Becker as well. So I get the feeling he's just on the edge of something great here. I mean, we know how great he was the first half of last year before he had problems with his back, and the second half was a disaster until the fall. Everything really from after Wimbledon quarterfinals against Carlos, the summer was a disaster. But since the fall, he's looked a lot more like the Holger Rune that we had been so excited about. So let's see what happens.
He also split up with his mother finally. I don't know if the mother will be again at this corner or not, but apparently he finally decided to stay far away from her. I don't know how long it will last.
Well, that's it. Yeah, it's true. She was so intense during the matches, and maybe it got to be too much for him. I hope he sorts all that out because we know how capable he is as a player. And when he got going against Fritz in Indian Wells, you felt like he could have beaten anybody in the world that last set and a half. He was that good, and almost as good when he lost to Medvedev. So I just feel like, you know, this would be it'd be nice to see him have a good run in Miami, because when he gets on the clay, that's where he did very well all through the clay court circuit last year. So I expect that Miami could carry him onto the clay with a lot of confidence. This is a chance for him to start, because we thought for a while, Ubaldo, I don't know how you felt. It felt like he was not going to be that far behind Alcaraz and Sinner, but at this point he is, and he needs to sort of prove that he belongs in that company. He has not demonstrated that yet.
Yeah, while another player who was supposed to become a multiple slam winners, and instead he hasn't won any, is Tsitsipas. And while Holger Rune has a problem with the mother, he has a problem with the father, because I mean, the father is creating a lot of anxiety, pressure on him, and for some reason, I don't know if he's distracted also about his love story with Paula Badosa, but honestly, and it's not that I'm making gossips, I'm just saying that certain things, certain personal things can distract a player from his main job, which is professional tennis.
Well, you know what, Ubaldo, you're right. And you just alluded to Rune's mother, but Tsitsipas's father is the word that comes to mind, overbearing. You know, that gets to what you were talking about with the pressure he's putting on his son. And too often you see him seeming to lecture Tsitsipas during the matches, tell him what he's just done wrong with the previous backhand that he just missed. and it just doesn't. It just seems like it's not beneficial to Tsitsipas. You know, I maybe he would argue with us. Maybe he would say, no, my father is the reason I've climbed so high already. But it just seems like he would be better off to have his father. Look at Coco Gauff's father. Coco Gauff brought in Gilbert. Yeah. And now he's still there, but he doesn't always sit there with Gilbert. Depends, but a lot of times he'll be off in the distance watching somewhere else. Seems to work for her, or has at least so far. And I just think that maybe if they would experiment, and Tsitsipas would say to his father, how about if you stay away for 2 or 3 months? We'll talk on the phone, but let me go on my own for a while here, and I'll bring in a coach if I need it. But let's see if you and I separate for a few months. How do I do? And we know Stefanos is a great clay court player. The clay court circuit is coming up. Be very interesting to see him play Monte Carlo, Rome, all those tournaments without his dad there.
Well, he won Monte Carlo twice in a row.
Of course.
So we need to see him at his best. Let's say that you know. And
French Open final against Novak, 2 sets to love up. He was very close to winning the French back in 21 there. So it's like, it's been his best surface by far. I mean, he's done great in Australia on the hard courts, but the clay has been his best. And I just feel like he would benefit to at least give it an attempt to distance himself from his father. That it would be good for both of them to see how it works. And if not, his father can always come back in. But I agree with you. I think there's been a lot of negativity because of his father's personality and criticism. Too much criticism.
Listen, I was since Tsitsipas has been the last one-hand backhand in the top 10, no? And in the history of tennis, it never had happened that there wasn't even one one-hand backhand in the top 10. Do you remember who were the first players who played with 2 hands? I mean, apart from, the first one who won it, I would say Connors, who won a slam, probably Connors in 1974. But and then, of course, they were behind him. There were all the Solomon, the Dibbs, the Borg, and so on in terms of age. But before then,
well, you think about the ones you just mentioned, because Borg won the French in 74. You know, Chrissy won. Well, obviously it's different with the women, but she won the French in Wimbledon. Connors won 3 of the 4 majors in 74. Yeah. So big year for the 2-handed backhand. Before that, Cliff Drysdale is the one that stands out for me. You know.
Okay. Yeah. I was trying to remember, because for me it was Beppe Merlo, who was twice in the semifinals at Roland Garros. But before him, I don't remember if Pancho Segura was playing forehand, maybe with.
Well, yeah, that's what he was known for, the 2-handed forehand. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
But Drysdale, as you know, was in the final at Forest Hills. He lost to Santana in 65, and Wimbledon semis, French semis. He did very, very well. Beat Laver at the first U.S. Open in 68. So everybody would talk about his 2-handed backhand. He'd be behind that baseline, driving those 2-handed returns. It was a great shot.
Yeah, and then maybe there was some Australian, I believe Bromwich, maybe.
Bromwich, yeah. Yep, and the Canadian Mike Belkin was the other one from that era. Do you remember Belkin?
Yes, I remember.
So there were a bunch, but there's no doubt that Connors, Everett, and Borg, those 3, really changed everything with their 2-handed back. I mean, that was the game was exploding with popularity back then, and they are all winning majors, and they changed everything, I think, in terms of the 2-hander becoming popular.
I don't want to make comparisons talking about myself, so I want to take a distance from that. But I was playing with 2 hands, and I remember that, it was earlier than Borg and Connors and so on, and I never won anything close to them. But my coach said, "Oh, Ubaldo, with 2 hands backhand, you cannot go anywhere. There is no way that someone with two-hand backhands can become a champion, and because you're losing 25 centimeters, and so you should run twice as much as anybody else. This was his, and I was 10 years old. And so I said, okay, okay. And I tried then sometimes to change and play with one hand, but but he was wrong after.
So wait, did you go back to the two-hander or did you give it up?
No, I kept playing with sometimes with two hands, sometimes with one hand. So I confused myself because the distance was never the same. You know, sometimes you have to get closer with two hands. You must run more and anticipate
Right.
more. With one hand, it's completely different story. So at the end, my forehand became much better.
That's funny. That's great.
Yeah.
That's a great story. Well, I think many coaches would have agreed with your coach back then.
Yeah.
But 5 years later, they didn't agree with him anymore.
Oh yeah. Well, today, no coach would teach a woman
Right.
to play with one hand backhand.
No, exactly.
Maybe some men still, you know, we have some players who still play with one hand backhand who are not. I mean, they're competitive enough. But if you have to teach a girl, they all will tell you to play with two hands. I mean, there is no doubts about that. Anyway.
Well, you know, when I did the book on Pete Sampras, Michael Chang was recalling when Pete got rid of the two-hander as a junior at 14. And yeah. Chang thought he should have kept the two-hander. He thought it was a great shot, you know. And now for Sampras in his era, I don't think Chang is right. I think it was the right thing for him to do as a serve and volleyer, playing the way the game was played then, and the fast surfaces, and the grass at Wimbledon was quicker, and he's playing a lot indoors. He's playing hard courts. And the type of game he had as an attacking player, I think he was better off. But Chang and others who saw Sampras with the two-hander in the juniors thought he had a very good two-handed backhand before he switched to the one-hander.
Yeah, who knows? Who knows
yeah.
what he would, maybe he would have won one Roland Garros more
well, that's
one Wimbledon less.
Could be. Lansdorp, Robert Lansdorp, who coached Pete, was one of his coaches, felt that he would have won Roland Garros, that he could have won it with the two-handers. But you're right. Then does he win? Does he end up with 7 Wimbledons or 4? We don't know.
yeah. Anyway, let's go back to Miami. Well, so what are we expecting from? Well, I'm thinking if Zverev could be. Rublev is a bit disappointing recently. I mean, he started pretty well the year, but then he seems to have no enough variety or strategy, Rublev. I mean, he eats more. I mean, maybe stronger than anybody else, because I spoke recently with someone. I think it was I don't remember if it was Krajcek in Rotterdam, but he said nobody hits the ball stronger than Rublev.
I think that statistics would bear that out. You know, a lot of times on our telecast, they show you the speed, the miles per hour on the forehands and backhands. I think it's true. What amazes me about Rublev is that he doesn't miss more. To hit as hard as he does and control the ball as well as he does, and his backhand is much better. I don't quite understand why his results have not been up to par this season. But he's the kind of player who plays a lot, as you know. He keeps coming back, plays a lot of tournaments. He will turn it around. He's also very good on clay. So we'll see what he does in Miami, but I expect very good things from him on the clay. But he's improved. I used to think the backhand was very vulnerable, but not so much anymore.
Well, his problem maybe it is the head, because he gets mad. He gets mad when he makes a mistake, and so he starts eating himself with a racket. That is his major problem, in my opinion, because you cannot allow yourself to waste nerves and time and concentration thinking what happened the point before. You have to think about the next point.
It's true. And then he just recently got himself disqualified for screaming at the officials. So he needs to calm down a little bit. I agree, and not be so hard on himself. Forget the officials. He's very hard on himself, and he gets way too angry. But listen, he's a great player. I think because of the pace of his shots that you just mentioned, a very good serve. He's a fighter. He's going to stay around the top 10 for a few more years yet.
Let's talk about the Norwegian Ruud, and then we will finish this conversation about Miami, because Ruud, who made 2 slams finals, no, or 3? 2 or 3? 3. And
he got to 2 French finals in a row, losing to Rafa and then Novak last year, and he had the U.S. Open final against Carlos.
Correct.
2.
Yes, correct. I was thinking 3, and he was very close. Once he was one win far from becoming #1 in the world. And then he had a very bad second part of the year last year. But now he's coming back, and he is a player, a complete player. He doesn't have shocking shots, shots that so brilliant that you will never forget. But he can be very, very solid and in all surfaces. Probably.
And he has one of the better forehands in the game. He's got a lot of RPMs on that forehand. It's better than it looks. And backhand has improved some. He's got a great temperament. I agree with you. I think he's the kind of the insiders like to watch him play, Ubaldo, because he's thoughtful, and he's also a really good guy. I mean, who's ever said anything negative about him? There's no gamesmanship. There's no shenanigans. He goes out and plays hard, and he's a good sport. And when he lost to Tommy Paul, he gave him in Indian Wells, gave him a nice greeting at the net. I like the way he comports himself a lot.
Yeah, he's positive. He's a true gentleman. Maybe he's too nice. Maybe he should have more killing instinct.
Well,
he's not a Jimmy Connors.
No, not at all. Not at all. But I think he's tough too. I do think he's tough. You're right. You can sometimes question whether somebody needs a little more killer instinct, is what you're getting at. But I think he has it. You can't get to 3 slam finals like that without being a great player. And I think he's on his way back. I think we're going to see. I think he's going to have a good year, and he's in good shape right now too.
Well, listen, Steve. Thanks a lot for your usual availability. It's a difficult word for me to pronounce, but we will talk in a while about the women's in Miami. But right now, thanks for having talked with me about the men's tournament in Miami. Bye-bye, yeah, Steve Flink, old friend, colleague, and Hall of Famer.
Thank you, Ubaldo. I enjoyed it.